If you've been following the Democratic primaries and the debates and all this other happy horse shit, and I have to a certain extent, although my mind's already made up, because I think I've heard all of these candidates, at least the two or three front runners, before. Buttigieg, no, only in the past year and a half. But certainly Biden, and certainly Bernie Sanders, and as far as Elizabeth Warren, did I just say Elizabeth Warren? I think I did. Amy Klobuchar. I knew Elizabeth Warren's positions because they're not that different from Bernie Sanders. As far as Amy Klobuchar is concerned, okay, I was not that familiar with her, but everybody else, okay, I got it. And one of the things, and as you know, I'm a big fan of MSNBC, even since Comcast bought NBC and consequently wound up owning MSNBC. Comcast is run by a right-winger, which may explain, and this is at Common Dreams, why the freak out at Comcast-owned MSNBC is out of control. Bernie Sanders is now the unchallenged, at this point, frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. And all those people that you thought you really admired on MSNBC are starting to lose their shit over this. Chuck Todd has described Bernie Sanders supporters as brown shirts. Well, fuck you, Chuck. Brown shirts. James Carville, yeah, he's still sane, I guess. James Carville said that Vladimir Putin would celebrate Bernie Sanders' win in Nevada the other night. Yeah, James Carville. Sounds like his wife. Chris Matthews, Tweety Bird, he screeched that if the Soviet Union had won the Cold War, Bernie Sanders would have been, quote, cheering for executions in Central Park, end quote. What the fuck? And a couple of days ago, I heard Steve Schmidt, who was a former Republican operative, who has been one of the most anti-Trump voices on MSNBC. It's put a lot of these Republicans, like Nicole Wallace, who hosts the program at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Time. It's put a lot of, she worked for George W. Bush. It's put a lot of these Republicans in a weird situation, well, put me, and if you're a liberal, in a weird situation. All of a sudden you find yourself agreeing with people like Nicole Wallace or Steve Schmidt or Max Boot or some of these right-wingers who can't stand the idea that their party no longer exists. We now have the Democratic Party, which also is about to dissolve, and the Republican Party, which has become the American Fascist Party. So these Republicans are homeless. They don't know what the fuck to do. But given a chance to bust Bernie, they'll do it. Steve Schmidt the other day referred to Bernie Sanders a couple of times as a socialist. Fuck you, Steve. What a shitty thing to do. Why don't you call Trump a fascist? Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist, or to turn it around so people like you, Steve Schmidt, won't freak out, he's a social democrat. How's that? Is that easier? Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. He doesn't believe in central planning. He doesn't believe that the government should maintain control of production. He doesn't follow that shit. And Steve Schmidt knows this. But he still feels it's okay for him to refer to Bernie Sanders as a socialist, because that word carries an awful lot of negative connotation in the United States, and it has for the past 80 years. Socialist. Ooh, you mean like Stalin? And then Chris Matthews, just when I thought I could tolerate this screaming fucking yellow-headed idiot, which I couldn't back during Clinton's impeachment. He used to drive me nuts. But Chris Matthews compared Bernie Sanders' win in Nevada, are you ready for this, to Hitler's invasion of France in 1940. Now, if that came out of the mouth of some filthy, scum-sucking right-winger like, let me think, I know, Rush Limbaugh or this little pissant Sean Hannity, I would have said, yeah, well, that's typical. But Chris Matthews compares Bernie Sanders' win in an election to Hitler's invasion of France. What the fuck? And Matthews went on to suggest that the country would be better off with 4 more years of Trump than 4 years of Bernie Sanders. Right? Now, you knew, if you've been watching MSNBC long enough, like I have, I've seen a lot of right-wingers come and go on that network. But if you've been watching long enough, you'll remember that Chris Matthews, who loves to tout the fact that he used to work for, who was the Speaker of the House when Reagan was president? Tip O'Neill. That Chris Matthews is of the Tip O'Neill Democratic establishment. If you remember, that's what he always talks about. But he comes across now, Chris Matthews comes across like a little fucking goose-stepping fascist who would just as soon have Trump for 4 more years. What's going on? It got so bad that one of MSNBC's own political analysts, I'm not sure who, called out the network, saying they sounded like, quote, out-of-touch aristocrats in a dying aristocracy, end quote. I have an idea who said that. I didn't happen to hear it when it was said. So, yeah, Common Dreams question, what's going on at MSNBC is easily enough answered. MSNBC is a corporate entity. It is interested in really one thing, massive profit, and no regulation in anything it does. And it sees Bernie Sanders as being someone who might stymie the goals of the billionaires who own corporate media in this country. There are 5 companies that own 90% of the media in this country. 5 companies. I'm talking about newspapers, television, and radio. And Comcast is one of the top. And Comcast is run by a right-winger. And take a look at the Fox Sewer organization. Who runs that? A proto-fascist. But MSNBC, huh? I wonder how long before the purge starts there, right? I wonder where Rachel will go. I wonder where O'Donnell will go. We know where, what's his name, the 11th hour? Brian Williams. We know where he'll go. He'll go wherever the fuck Comcast tells him to go. He's just glad to be working after he was caught in a misstatement about being on a plane that took fire from the enemy. Oh my God, Brian, you should be burned alive. These are weird times. But I swear to God, when it gets to the point that the subtle yet absolute push for censorship is going on a network like MSNBC, and consequently its parent company, NBC, when it becomes obvious that self-censoring is taking place, which is a first step to full censorship, I get nervous. How about you? nervous? Hardly the word to use. How about slightly panicked? Well, you can't be slightly panicked. You're either panicked or you're not, right? So what's between nervous and panicked? Alarmed? That'll work. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. You have your choice. You can listen to the ranting with the audio podcast or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com. And never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.